creating that iconic noise, and when we hear it, we know something scary is going to happen.
Wow, no one's ever asked me that before. I wanted to make a comment because of all the 4 different pieces that you heard here, I mean, mine's kind of like a cartoon with machetes. They're all a little, do you notice how they're all completely different music? There was this grandiose, the first one, this grandiose thing. I mean, if you listen to the music by itself, you would never say, oh, that's from a horror film. And then Charlie's piece, you know, powerful electronic boom, boom, boom drums, you know. Hers was silence. How powerful the silence was in that scene. And just those little whooshes and stuff like that, they work. A composer in a film, no matter what kind of film it is, you're a dramatist. You're trying to get the audience to feel what the director wants. And but I just thought, and it also came up with the fact that when you're doing a horror film, all bets are off. You can do whatever you want. You could go effects and drums, you could go grandiose, you could go silence, you could make vocal sounds like you just asked, and you could go and suddenly you bought a house in California. I mean, that score is 13 guys in a basement in New Jersey. So who knew what was going to happen? Now, what was the question? How did I get over that?
Yeah.
I don't think I'm giving away any plot thing here, but late in the movie and real, one of the problems with dramatically with Friday the 13th is there's a killer knocking off people like crazy. You never see the killer, you don't know who the killer is, and you don't find out until Reel 9, back in the days of reels. And we were sitting around talking, and there's no money. We're trying to put food on the table. Anyway, there's a close-up of Mrs. Voorhees' mouth, Betsy Palmer, where it's a close-up of her mouth, and it's like, kill her, mommy, and then it's her voice, and then it's little Jason's voice, back and forth. And I'm going like, she hears voices. So at the time I was studying a composer named Penderecki, which I highly ask you to go listen to because it's incredible music. And there was a choral piece where vowels in Polish, consonants are very 100 people just putting a T or a K at the end of a word. It was amazing. So I thought, kill her mommy. So I just took the K from kill and the M from mommy, and I went, and then we ran it through an echoplex, and it came out, and I bought a house in California. And you all owe me a nickel, because every time that happens, I get a nickel.
Now, the timeline of Friday the 13th, what I want to try to get to was any Hitchcock films kind of inspirational in creating the music of this?
Well, first of all, if you're going to score films, if you haven't been influenced by Hitchcock and Bernard Herrmann, you better start listening now because everybody has. And I was influenced, if you ask me like where did I get some things, there is some Hitchcock, but there's actually a lot more Jerry Goldsmith. What was the movie where they were selling the body parts? Coma, yes, thank you. Coma, there was a big influence of that. There was a big influence of Penderecki. A lot of this music is what they call aleatoric, in that it's free music. I didn't necessarily even write notes. I just let them play. It's sound, but made with instruments. When you think of horror, you're used to hearing something, and the movie will tell you what it is. I mean, like this big fire with the bear on fire, and there's a guy sitting there, and there's people, choir, and he wrote this wonderful, heroic, almost somewhat heroic kind of piece. But you see, it worked with that picture. What makes you afraid? What makes you afraid of something is more. It's in the picture. Dara, I want to call you Dana. Dara, she let the visuals and the silence play. I love this. I almost was like, God, I want to see the whole picture, because there's those moments you were pulled into the movie. You're pulled into the movie. What makes it scary? You remember when the lady appeared? That could easily be funny, but it's not. In that situation, it was scary. So your job as a composer is to get that drama correct, manipulate the audience in the way that the director and the producer want to have happen. So a lot of it's about expectations. Like you're sitting there and you're like, this music it's making me. Why is it making me feel this way? Or what visually is making me uncomfortable? And for example, if we got up and we went out that door, you would expect it would take, I don't know, 25 seconds, 30 seconds. But what if it took like an hour and a half? It would be pretty funny. Carol Burnett show, remember the old song? Yeah, that's really funny. But what if it only took a third of a second? That would be scary. You gotta watch comedy, scary. They're real close to each other. I'm sorry, I went off.
I want to make sure that the audience get a chance to ask any questions. I've got a few more for you guys, and I know that we've probably got 10 minutes left of this panel. So if you guys have questions, think of it in your head. We've got a mic here if you guys want to line up. In the meantime, I want to know, what are some instruments and techniques used to make us cringe when we're watching a horror film? Is there anything in particular that you go to that kind of gives people that chill or that kind of jump? Anybody that wants to talk about that?
It's all about the picture. It's all about the picture. How is the picture doing it? We jumped when that lady appeared. In your movie, we all went whoa, because it sort of came out of nowhere, right? But and then you feel the power of Charlie's of music, the power of that drums and everything. It's just like, wow, you feel that. In my case, it sounds chaotic because there's 9 violin players in a basement just like scratching back and forth, and it's you associate with that. But what happens though, unfortunately, is that sometimes something really works so well that it becomes funny. I mean, how many times do you hear Jaws now in a film and you start to laugh? Or even how many times have you heard this? Okay, you guys, this isn't funny anymore. It's not scary, it starts to get funny. And you got to be real careful. So how you do it, you're trying to make the drama happen. We're all dramatists.
Do you have an answer for that, Johnny?
Well, I'm guilty of using a lot of pieces of scrap metal played with a violin bow, at least in the Saw movies. That's been used quite a bit. And that, that's not a brand invention of mine, but that's the type of sound that was sort of a traditionally scary, stingy kind of noise that you hear in movies going back a long way, where they would use a violin bow on the edge of a cymbal to create this sort of an eerie, scraping tone that still has a pitch and can be used in a musical context. And so I have a whole collection of bits and pieces and some customized instruments that are played that way. And it's that texture, at least in the context of a Saw movie, you sort of have a license to use that kind of sound because of the title and the context of the subject matter. So I'm guilty of doing that a lot, but it still works even all these years later.
Yeah. Dara, do you have an answer to that? Any instruments or techniques?
I mean, kind of like Charlie, I just kind of see what's lying around. Actually, when I was working on this movie, I thought that I heard something. I'm like, what is still playing? I thought there was something wrong with my computer, and it was actually my boyfriend was over there somewhere. He was in the garage sanding something, and I'm like, huh. So I went and I grabbed my phone, and I went downstairs and like, do that again. So I recorded him using the sander, and then he stopped and he said, "Is that okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, that was great. Let's do it again. And next time, don't talk after I run." But yeah, it's just kind of like, I don't know. You're just kind of spelunking around. For me, I just kind of spelunk around my house to see what sounds weird and unsettling.
That's fine. Give an answer.
Sample it.
Yeah, I think, sometimes to me it's, horror, film in general, it's world building. And, when I work with Ari, like, we'll often, Darren's a midsummer, we'll often do things like, we'll actually take the room tone out of what was in the picture, and, I'll kind of like do this kind of hybrid score sound design thing where, like, I'll take the, like, wind, or I'll take, like, the white noise of the synth, and then, I'll have this really low, almost barely audible sub thing. I'm a nerd and I do a lot of research into like audio and physics of audio, and like, oh, this is the frequency of sound that you feel right before there's an earthquake. If you put that in for long enough, you can't hear it, but you can feel it when you become really kind of nauseous and weird. Why do I feel like that? But then sometimes when you've done that for 2 to 5 minutes in the scene, you don't have to do anything, you can just take it away. And then it becomes scary. Sometimes it's the absence, the build-up of something and the absence of something.
That's interesting. So there's an audio that we hear before an earthquake? Is that what you're saying?
There's a low frequency thing that happens
Wow.
that's inaudible, but it's physically
Like a vibration. Yeah, interesting. Cool. What scares you? We'll start with you, Bobby. What scares you?
sitting up here and talking to a bunch of
Thanks for being here, facing your fears. What about you, Charlie? What scares you?
Little creepy crawly things that move fast, so I will not be scoring any sequels to Arachnophobia.
A blank sheet of paper that I have to fill up. I think one thing, and we're all talking about scraping cymbals and finding them with sander in a garage. One of the fun things to do, if you're into sampling and you hear something, you sample it, and a lot of times you go like, oh, that's a cool sample, and you have a keyboard where the real sample is on C, the middle C, but there's all kinds of good stuff way out here and way down here. It might just be some sort of cymbal thing or something here, like a bowed cymbal, like right here. But you go up like 3 octaves, man, that is some strange squeaky stuff down there, and down at the bottom is like, what is that? Well, it's that stupid cymbal dropped down 3 octaves. So you're always playing around trying to find, a sound that evokes what I'm trying to say. I bet you have this too. It's Bob Clearmountain.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have the thing where he took a lampshade and he took all of the stuff off the lampshade and just the wiry thing, and he's playing on a lampshade wow, what a cool sound, especially when you move it around the keyboard, have a water tank, and all kinds of crazy, just samples that right in the middle, they're nothing, and when you move them around, it's fun. It's like we were talking about, horror film, horror music, all bets are off. You can do whatever you want. If you're doing a TV drama, you're stuck with chord changes and melodies and all kinds of, that kind of music stuff.
All right, I want you to sort of answer the question of what scares you, and then I want to switch into if somebody wants to work in horror films, whether musically or just as a filmmaker, what is a piece of advice of how to get involved? So first, what scares you?
Okay. Let's see. I'm a hypochondriac, so any weird little feeling that I have, so maybe the answer is my own mind. What to do? I mean, honestly, the first step is to just make something. I think that's the first step for anything. It's just have a library catalog of things that you like, that you have available to show people. It's hard to sell people on an idea, and it's always easier to talk about music.
Absolutely, yeah. Do you guys have any advice on getting into the film industry, music industry?
I would take some films that you like, scenes that you like, whether it's Friday the 13th or a Darius film or anyone. You can find these, on YouTube. You download them, take all the sound out, and write a piece to fit that something the way you would do it. That's one way. And then the other thing is learn to listen hard to these scores, like the 4 things you heard tonight. Listen hard to them. Try to, I didn't say copy, I said emulate what's going on. Using what the stuff that you know, the sounds that you know, the sounds that you have. Especially when you start dealing with synths and things like that, you're really limited to what gear you have. You want to play a clarinet, and you go like, "This is my clarinet." You go, "Oh God, that's." So I think that's a way to sort of start.
Well, and like to go build on what Harry said, you can, if you're rescoring or if you're analyzing a piece of music that you love to a movie that you love, and you think this scene is so cool with this music in it, and you're fiddling around and wanting to figure out how it was done, you can more safely emulate the form. In other words, the shape of the piece of music. Does it have drums? Is it violins? Whatever. But not emulating the content. So like not playing the same notes and chords, but trying to create some little sonic sculpture that has the same kind of density graph or the same visual shape without infringing on anyone's precious chords and notes that they may have written for this movie that you know so well. And that's a good exercise because that helps you wrap your brain around what are the ingredients in a piece of music for film and how is it sort of assembled,
Cool. Bobby, any advice?
Yeah, I mean, it's more kind of ambient advice, I would say, but, find out who you are and what you like. And don't be afraid of anybody telling you that it's too weird or it's never going to work in anything, because people told me I was too weird my whole life, and don't ever take no for an answer. I think, particularly in film music, in music in general, what excites people are things that they haven't heard before. So get in touch with yourself and don't be afraid to be strange.
Great answer. I'm going to be a little louder now, but what I like about that scene and what you provided is that we got a good sense of like a story that's going on inside this kind of spooky place. We have some hits that were going on. First of all, why don't you tell us about The Invitation, because it's probably the film that maybe people might not be most familiar with. So give us a little bit of a synopsis, and then we can go into the music.
Yeah, The Invitation, it is about Evie, who is a woman that was kind of found by a mysterious cousin that she didn't know she had from a 23andMe type thing. And they bring her to England, and she falls in love with a guy who is the head of this manor, but turns out he is Dracula, And it's really about the three brides of Dracula, and they need to fill that third spot because her grandmother had recently passed. So they are trying to recruit her basically to be one of the brides of Dracula.
And when you are scoring a scene like this and you're hitting these kind of spook, kind of jump scare notes, is that like a director's note, or is that what you're feeling out in the scene, or how do you kind of get to that point in the scoring?
A little bit of both. I was taking some time figuring out which scene I wanted to do or wanted to send for this, and I think I wanted to do something that was a little more storytelling and atmosphere building rather than just like broad melodies, just because it felt fun for me. But yeah, a lot of that is a conversation earlier on with the director. Jess Thompson and I, we talked about kind of incorporating the voices of the three brides of Dracula pretty early on. So I hired 3 singers, and we did a lot of vocal work. So there's also, there are like the big vocal moments at the end, but then there are also these like little that go earlier on, and it's just kind of like the other brides are kind of teasing her. She's the new girl, and they're kind of taunting her throughout the movie. So that was just it's almost childlike. And then there are moments where a lot of the vocals at the end throughout the movie are actually recorded backwards and then reversed to kind of create this other eerie sense to them. So it's the human voice is something that's very familiar to all of us, but when you take it and kind of reverse it, it just makes it feel a little uncanny valley. You can't really tell why.
Oh, cool. I'm curious because you've worked on all sorts of types of genres. A lot of composers work in multiple mediums. But you did a film called Bark and Star Goes to Palmar, which is a comedy musical, and I know that you kind of also love choir. You love working in this world. How do you turn your brain into horror mode? Like, if people think of maybe an athlete, they're really good at football, but they're not good at basketball. Like, how do you actually jump between the sports, so to speak, in your brain to score something like that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it is. Horror is actually one of the most fun mediums to work in because, as Charlie was talking about too, you get to kind of play around different sandboxes that you may not necessarily be allowed to in other genres. There are kind of no rules, so you get to just be more inventive with your sounds. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, let's go on to Harry. Harry, we've got a great clip montage of Friday the 13th. We've got lots of axe murdering, so everybody, I hope that I forgot to give a little disclaimer that this is a bloody film. It can be gory, so scoring in the daylight and all these horrors. How did you balance that? Like, how did you approach that?
I think the idea of the way that the music was going to work was, we wanted to. It was about it kind of functioning in the way that it's not supposed to. So I know that Ari has taglined this film, maybe publicly, I'm not sure, but to me, he definitely said it's the Wizard of Oz for perverts. So we were kind of looking at it, and there was, a lot of references for me were like Alice in Wonderland or early Disney movies, or like, Nelson Riddle and like early kind of capital stuff, and kind of using that. Like, I always find like opposition is really scary. So if you have something that looks really unsettling with something that is quite pretty or not very discordant, sometimes that can double the scare factor.
Yeah, I think the creepiness of this movie is that it's just so beautiful, and what's happening, what we're watching is so disturbing, and it's just crazy to appreciate what you're looking at, but also be weirded out by it. Obviously, we hear some vocals in this particular cue, and what I find interesting also is as the guy starts burning and he starts screaming, I feel like the music also tonatically matches the scream tone. Is that on purpose?
It is, and it was primarily something I did like as a joke. I scored that film, like Ari was in the studio with me, and I did that whole scene like in front of him, and so we were kind of taking it section by section. And when it got to that, I was like, wait a minute, and I dialed up like an ominous bit of quiet patch or something, and we just burst out laughing so much that we were like, well, I guess that's where it's going to go now, and then
It's jubilant. It's wonderful. Now, obviously, Ari coming off of Hereditary into Midsummer. Did you watch Hereditary to study for this at all?
When we first met, Hereditary wasn't made.
Oh, okay.
He found me because my agent received a note. This guy had written a script listening to one of my records. So I was like, well, I've got to meet this maniac. And then so he came to my house and we had coffee, and he kind of pitched Midsummer to me. And at that time, you could see his short films on his website from film school. And I just thought he was obviously a genius, so we just kind of said yes. And then during kind of pre-planning for Midsummer, he was doing Hereditary, and I went to London to see a screening of it. And I remember he was sat next to me while I was watching it, and my palms were like they were just a sweaty mess back then. And I just turned to him and he was like, "We're gonna ruin people even more." And that's what he said.
Wow, awesome. All right, Charlie, let's go into you. I would actually love to lead into you with your clip. We have this awesome clip, which is you rocking out in your days of 9 Inch Nails. And then we go into the Saw montage mayhem, and I can't wait to share this clip with everybody. So if we don't mind killing the lights here. Group of composers, I'm so excited to introduce to you guys. Let's see, we got Dara Taylor. Say hi, Dara. Charlie Clouser, say hi. Bonnie Irwin. And Marianne Green. All right, guys. So this is about music and horror, obviously. And what I really want to talk about, first of all, is are you guys fans of horror? Or were you fans of horror before you got involved in filmmaking? Or did you become a fan after you started? We'll start with Charlie.
Who, me?
Yeah, we'll start with you.
I admittedly was not like super deep into the genre, so when I started scoring the first Saw movie, and so it was really kind of working with people like James Wan and Limonel who were very deep to the genre and had a very deep knowledge of, you know, Italian slasher flicks from the 70s and that sort of thing. That helped to educate me, and they really helped to put in front of me the kind of things that were influential to them, and that helped to shape my journey as well. So I wasn't as deep to it as some probably in this room are.
What about you, Bobby?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on metal music, so from that, you know, in the 90s when through the whole British video nasty invasion, and so yeah, I mean, horror was like horror, metal, and anything dark and weird and things that my parents didn't like, basically informed everything that I do today.
Dara, what about you? Were you a fan of horror before you got involved in the scoring?
I think kind of tangentially, but you know, honestly, it scared me a little. But I think once you kind of learn how the sausage is made and realize how much some of the tension is created by the music, you're like, oh, I'm in charge. It can't hurt me. I think then became a lot more interested in, you know, all the horror around me.
Yeah. What about you, Eric? Were you a fan of the genre before?
He created the genre.
I know, I was going to say.
The horror films scare the hell out of me, and that's probably why I was good at it. I'm not a big fan of, you know, not a big fan of horror. I'm a big fan of film music, period. But yeah, I think the music, the horror films always just scared the hell out of me, and it's probably why I guess I'm good at it.
You know how to scare yourself with your own music.
Yeah, I scare
I was waiting for
myself.
someone else to come pick it up, but they won't, so.
Oh no, you lose
I
the.
dropped
Your name off,
Oh no. I'm also terrified of horror films. I'm a funny moderator for this panel because I confess, I've never seen Saw. It terrifies me. Actually, I've seen the first half of the first one, and I was like, I'm done. But I want to kick us off with some clips. Just let's get in the mood, you know. The first clip I'm going to play is a scene from Midsummer, music by Bobby here. And I just got to give you a heads up. Unfortunately, when I downloaded the clip, it cuts off a little awkwardly at the end, but we'll get into the mood of it all. So if we can, if we could kill the lights. And first of all, let's talk about Nine Inch Nails, because love the band. And I love that that's part of your little montage. I want to know if that time in the band really influences your work as a composer.
And it was part of the reason that James and Lee found me for the first Saw movie was because of some obscure remixes that I had done of Nine Inch Nails that were like only available in European CD singles and stuff like that. And they kind of knew, I already had a background in scoring, having worked underneath a composer before my years in Nine Inch Nails. So I kind of knew the process and the workflow and kind of how it was done. I wasn't strictly a refugee from a band, but James and Lee had put together a temp version of the music for the first Saw movie, using all kinds of stuff from records. They had pieces of these remixes that I had done, and they also had, at one point towards the end of the movie, they had like a Ministry song playing out of one speaker, and like Einstürzende Neubauten, which is like clattering industrial metallic music playing out of the other speaker. And they definitely did not want sort of a conventional horror score or an orchestral type of score. They did want to have a industrial and electronic feel to the kind of fabric of the score, but then at the same time it had to actually serve a purpose in some spots. Like towards the end, James really wanted it to feel as though the lights got switched on in the room when that last cue starts for the ending montage. And so that was, fortunately we had a game plan that we had this sort of roadmap that we wanted the score to dissolve and turn into this murky thing, and then have this bright light switch moment. And using the years of Nine Inch Nails experience in terms of musical sound design and how to torture sounds with electronics in the studio, that definitely helped to be able to fulfill some of those moments when the music had to just get wrecked. And so I was able to, even though I had to do that score fairly quickly, I think it was about 5 weeks from start to finish, and did it while a record was being recorded in my other studio at the same time. So I was kind of squashed myself into a spare room at the studio to do it. But having that sort of having permission to be sonically destructive on the score allowed me to make use of some of the stuff that I learned and attempted to perfect during the Nine Inch Nails years, for sure.
And 10 Saw films later, how has the music evolved for you? Obviously, where it started, I'm sure your technique, the technology, the budget, everything has changed in the meantime. So how has the music evolved for you?
The first one was done with minimal equipment in a tiny setup and also with minimal time. But there was, and I still kind of look back at the music from the first one and think, oh, that one, I kind of got it right then, and then I did all this other, I don't know what I was doing on these other ones. But and when I look back at sort of because at one point I compiled an anthology CD release that kind of spanned all the scores from all the movies and piled them all together. And what I realized while doing that was that the style of the music, as it changes from sequel to sequel, was really following the visual style of the directors. And, for instance, Darren Bousman has almost a kind of gothic feel to some of the way he frames shots and lights them and so forth. So, and I'd like to say that this was all part of some grand plan, but it kind of wasn't. It was just me reacting to what I was seeing on the screen. And when Darren has these sort of backlit crucifix kind of framing of shots, then it just seemed natural to use ominous epic choir, where that wouldn't be appropriate if what I was seeing on the screen was different. And so, you know, I would love to say I had this master plan for an arc of the music across 10 movies, but really it was reactive, and it was just me seeing something and going, wow, that looks almost like a Renaissance painting. That should have some ominous choir behind it. Whereas if it was a scene of somebody rummaging around in that dirty bathtub in the first movie, those epic choir sounds wouldn't feel right for that.
Right.
And a lot of times as I'm picking sounds and trying to figure out what to do with them, I'm also wanting them to sound like they belong in the place that is being depicted on the screen. And so if we're underground in some dank dungeon like in the first Saw film, then the sounds want to be claustrophobic and not sort of epic war drums of the Riders of Rohan coming across a field of battle. That would seem, to me anyway, would seem like a mismatch. So a lot of times I'm reacting to what I'm seeing, and that has created like weird shifts in the tone of the music as the directors rotate in and out of the Saw sequels.
Now, are you making original music yourself still?
Oh yeah.
Awesome. That's
I'm
great.
just sitting around fiddling at the moment, but waiting to see if they make any more Saw movies, which...
Let's see. Fantastic. All right. So then we gotta end. Sorry, everybody. Sorry. You get the questions, sir.
I'll just make it to a quick story. Charlie, this past month, I trained for the Los Angeles Marathon, and when I was on the 25th mile, I couldn't carry on, but I put on Mary Shaw's theme from Dead Silence, and it just got me going like Speedy Gonzalez. I won't say thank you so much. And, how did you do that for Billy the Puppet and Mary Shaw? How did you compose that?
Now refresh my memory. What was the question again?
Dead Silence. How did you make the theme for Billy the Puppet and Mary Shaw?
Billy the Puppet's theme was kind of. I knew that it had to meet it sort of had a checklist of what it had to do. It had to be like a riff, almost like a guitar riff, like AC/DC Back in Black or something. It had to be small and compact because there was going to be so much information coming at the audience that the music couldn't be distracting, but it still wanted to be like memorable and hummable or whatever. And so we kind of knew that it had to be just short and not distracting. And the Mary Shaw thing, that was another kind of similar exercise, but very much like it came from James Wan, because I was fiddling around with the score. I kind of started at the beginning of the film and was working my way through it. I played him a bunch of stuff that wasn't like cohesive and didn't have a single identity. And James, I was about a third of the way through the movie and I was playing what I'd been working on, and James said, stop. What you should do is go to the end of the movie and find the most important moment. And of course, this is what they probably teach you in film music school that I never went to. But he said, go to the end of the movie, to the most important final reveal scene, and get that nailed down. And then whatever that strong piece of melody music is, can become the raw material from which you build the whole rest of the score. And then I sort of had to act like I knew that all along, and that's what I wound up doing. So at the end of the movie, it's a fully developed piece, but all the way through, all the rest of the music, even when it's just sort of floaty wisps of music, it's still based on that like little music box theme that is also used in the very first main titles. And like that's kind of all the music there is, and it's just being reinterpreted with different sounds and slower, faster, with more density, or maybe with just one or two sounds, but they're all basically, eventually, everything can be boiled down to that one little like music box kind of riff that's used in the main titles. It's very like easy to hear it there because there's not somebody screaming as their leg gets torn off or whatever. And that was very much done through coaching from James Wan, and him saying, and I think because he had such a strong background in classic horror and like even cheap and genre horror and B movies, and he said, this is something I know that works and always affected me in a great way when I was watching movies as a kid. So let's use that, and again, this ties on what I said before. We were using an established form, a shape, and putting our own content into it, and to see if that worked, and it did.
Thank you so much for your question. Unfortunately, we're at the end of the panel, but everybody, thank you for being here and helping